Yajong, hello. Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time, thank you for being here. My name is Bao, and I started this channel to share my life and experience on being Hmong, Christian, and divorce. I am at this stage of my life, from the last video, very pregnant and about to go into labor. And I'm sharing this story because it has a huge impact on my life as well, and it would shape my memories forever. So when I was 15, I had this vision. I've never shared this with anyone before. When I was 15, 16, I had this vision come into my mind that and this is morbid, I was going to bleed to death when I have my first child. At the time, I'm thinking, whoa, over-imaginative imagination here, whatever, kind of brushed it off. But it came and it went, and this thought came and went. As I hear friends having children, I see little babies, and it just kind of floats by, death at labor, it's really weird. And so now I'm getting ready to go and have my first baby, and the thought comes back to my mind, and I'm like, okay, no sweat, right? I was like, God, you are in control, and whatever happens is going to happen. And so the baby comes out, everything's normal and great, baby's doing well, and then it came time for them to clear out my body, pull the placenta, and do what they have to do. And it was in that moment that I felt that vision of 15 came true. So I felt this pain when they were tugging the placenta out, but it wasn't long enough and it wasn't painful enough for me to actually say something. It felt like a horse needle was maybe injected, pricked into my skin, and that's how it felt. So I didn't say anything, and the doctors too finished their stuff, didn't say anything. So I'm thinking, okay, it was probably normal, and all women probably go through that. And so I didn't say anything. The nurses left. They came back later, about an hour or so, to clean me up some more. They kept changing the pad under me, but no one is talking to me. I can't see down my body from how I was laying, and they're coming and going. And then pretty soon they're taking my blood from my arm, half hour, maybe it felt like every half hour they were taking my blood, and they kept changing my pad. And I remember the one moment when the doctors came in and they were talking to themselves, and they glanced over at me and then continued talking back to themselves again. And by this time, I have a sort of I'm cognizant enough to know that I'm laying there and I can see all these people and I can hear all these noises around me, the machine over my head, the nurses talking softly, and no one is talking to me about what is going on. But what I don't notice that is different is that I'm not talking either. I am actually not even thinking. I'm just observing. And that is the state of mind that I was in by then. So I'm just an observant in the room. And I don't even feel like I'm a patient. I feel like I was just placed there and I'm just watching these people come and go, doing their job. And I'm just laying there and I'm feeling good. I'm feeling fine. But what I didn't realize was that oxygen was slowly stopping, going into my head, and my body was going into overdrive to patch whatever was torn or bleeding and wouldn't stop in my body. And so I guess, in a way, if I could animate it, all the neurons are just stopping with their signals to my brain because they need everyone working to fix whatever was bleeding down there. But to my mind, my body was probably going into shock. I didn't feel any pain. I was really in a very a wonderful, peaceful state of mind. I was just observing and feeling like nothing was wrong. It's kind of weird to think back about it. Anyways, the nurse comes in and asks me if I would like to shower before my first meal. I just had 14 plus hours labor. I'm feeling weak because, of course, I didn't eat before that. And And so she comes in with that offer, and I'm excited. I managed to smile. I'm like, oh yes, I would love a shower. She comes to my side and helps me up, swings me over, and I stand up from the bed. And I take one step from the bed, and the next thing I know, I'm waking up with like 8 faces, all like in a tunnel above me, with a light in my eye. And I'm like, whoa, what just happened here? It's just like the movies, when someone wakes up from being blacked out, all you see are these elongated shoulders and necks, and all their heads are like gathered in a tiny little circle in your vision. But when my eyes cleared, they were all on either side of my bed, and I remember thinking in that moment, like, oh wow, it's just like the movies. And so I had blacked out when I stood up from the bed, and asking the ex at the time what happened. He said that, the moment I stepped up and tried to go into the shower, I immediately went into a seizure and blacked out. And what looked like a gallon of blood gushed out of me and spread all over the floor. And the nurse was freaking out, screaming for code blue as she slammed the bell. And he came over, the ex came over and picked me up and put me back on the bed. And that was when they all came rushing in and told him to back away. Now, this is probably the one moment of miracle that I can ever share from my life. I'm kind of sad that I wasn't awake to see it, but from the ex's telling, he said that when he picked me up, he had to step on my blood to get to me and put me back on the bed before everybody told him to step away. And he said that when he stepped back from everyone and he looked down at his body, there was no speck of blood on him, not on his shirt front, jacket front. He picked up his foot and looked at his soles, and there was no blood on the bottom of his shoes. He left no track of blood prints on, his way coming back away from everyone. So I was like, wow, that's really unusual. And it was unusual to him too. And there's no way for him to explain that away. I have to take his word for it, because there was no blood on the clothes, and he brought those back home. So that was very, very cool and unusual. And in thinking back, I'm like, wow, he might have felt that he was physically there to pick me up and carry me, but I felt more like spiritually he was just the physical vessel for something supernatural to happen, so that I could be lifted up and placed back on the bed for my comfort. And so, yeah, that's the miracle moment, about how clean he was, miraculously, which is unbelievably, because he explained that they had to mop that whole floor and clean up everything. Because when I came back to, and all the doctors were in front of my face, and I was able to glance around me, the floor was clean. I didn't see anything there. And that's why I was like, are you sure? Because I didn't see anything. They did a really good job. Anyways, now they finally come back, and the doctor is like, you know what? You need a blood transfusion, but we need your consent. And at that time, I was like a vegetable. Again, now their voices are just mumbles to me. Like, I couldn't even hear the words that they're saying. It didn't even come through clear to me. But the ex was closer to me, and so he was telling me they needed me to nod or say yes. And I could manage, like, I guess, a nod. And so they took that as a yes. And then they just went to work, immediately started the transfusion. They sedated me and knocked me out for the night. And when I woke up the next day, I could then finally roll over and sit up on my own. I couldn't do that before the whole day before. I was just so out of it. And when I came to, I could not remember anything. And this is what I needed to share, because this loss of memory and short-term memory is going to impact pretty much the rest of the next decade of my life, the next dozen years of my life. And it was just so big. I woke up not remembering that I just had a child, that I had just went into labor. I just knew that I woke up in a hospital, and he had to tell me that I was there for labor. And then I was like, oh, I want to see this baby. And that was how I went. Anything short term, if I just met a person and I turned away, I would not remember that I just met them. I wouldn't remember their name. I wouldn't remember conversations. It was very, very hard, very hard. And I didn't remember that he had an emotional affair. So that went with the loss of memories. And that is why we never talked about it again. That is why I never remembered it again. And that's why it never came back until years later when my memories started to finally come back to me. And so when I woke up that morning, I woke up with a blank slate. I can't even tell you how that feels. There's a movie called 50 First Dates, which I've never seen. But it kind of reminds me of possibly maybe that's what happened to me. To go to bed every night and wake up and not remember anything that I did the day before, any conversations I had the day before, people I met the day before. And every day was a new day. Every day was always new. And if I went to bed angry, I woke up unangry. If I went to bed happy, I woke up not remembering why I was happy. And it was just like that. And it was a blessing in disguise. I will say that now, because later on, those things that premonition I had when I arrived at their house, that I was heading down a crap hole of stuff to come that were very wrong, all that was about to happen to me. All of that was about to happen. I can't tell you how quickly that happened. Right after I had this baby, and the memories were gone, and I could not retain short-term memories. And all the stuff that was about to spiral into my life would be quickly forgotten, and then it would start all over again. And I was stuck in this loophole of, did they really do that? Yes, they did do that, because I developed a mechanism to help me remember, which was to write things down in my phone, because my phone was where no one could check and no one cared to look. And so I didn't write any journals where things could be found, but I would keep my phone very close to me. And if things happened that I felt I needed to remember, I would write notes in my phone. I would write in the calendars. I would write conversations that I needed to remember, because every morning I developed the routine of picking up my phone, opening up my notes, and just kind of going through what happened the day before. So yeah, it was tedious in a way, but also very necessary, because if I didn't do it repetitively before the accident, I didn't remember it. I didn't recall it. So I could remember dressing, because you do that repetitively, eating, cooking. Those are stuff that I did normally and repetitively. Cleaning, right? Hygiene, that's fine. None of that was affected. My work was not affected because I did that every day. But it was just the short-term stuff. It was the conversations that I had that day. It was the new stuff that came up that didn't have any relevance, or maybe it did. I wouldn't even remember. So yeah, it was tough. I had to go through that for a very, very long time. And just a quick throw out, of how badly that medical incident is by the time that they had to give me a blood transfusion, I later asked the ex, I heard about the transfusion, how many bags, how many units did they have to, put into me to get me to wake back up normally? And he told me that they had to transfuse like 5 units. 5 units. A normal human body is supposed to have about 7 to 8 units, I think, when I last read. So to have to need 5 units to just replenish my blood supply, that's pretty big. So you can get an image of just how much blood I had lost. And by that time, and the loss of memory was because there was not enough oxygen going into my brain. And so that affected my memory. And that would turn into a, like I said, blessing in disguise that worked for me. It worked for me. And I will explain how that worked and on to the next phase. Thank you so much for being here. Have a very happy new year to all of you. Thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate you being here. God bless. 新期多. Bye.